is full of strange people, but there's something especially unsettling about Craigslist. Maybe it's the anonymity. Maybe it's the fact that you're meeting complete strangers for deals that seem too good to be true. Most of the time, nothing happens, but sometimes you answer the wrong ad. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 true Craigslist horror stories involving creepy buyers, isolated meetups, and encounters that could have ended far worse than they did. These are the kinds of stories that make you think twice before meeting someone from the internet alone, especially at night. So lock your doors, turn down the lights, and if you've ever used Craigslist before, you might want to listen carefully, because these stories are terrifyingly real. Back in 2019, my girlfriend had become obsessed with the idea of building a small home gym setup in our garage. We had both started trying to get healthier, and she kept talking about wanting a treadmill so she could run before work in the mornings. The problem was that decent treadmills are insanely expensive. Even used ones were usually way outside our budget, so for a couple weeks I checked Craigslist every night after getting home from work, hoping I'd eventually find somebody just trying to get rid of one quickly. Most of the listings were garbage, broken machines, sketchy descriptions, people asking nearly full retail price for equipment that looked like it had survived 3 divorces and a house fire. But then one night, I found a listing that immediately stood out. The pictures showed a sleek black treadmill sitting in what looked like a spotless spare room. It honestly looked almost new. The description was short. Barely used. Works perfectly. Need gone ASAP. $250. That price alone should have made me suspicious. The seller's name was listed as Marcus. I messaged him expecting either no reply or some obvious scam attempt, but he answered within minutes. He sounded completely normal, friendly, relaxed. He explained that his wife had bought the treadmill during one of her fitness kicks, used it a handful of times, then completely lost interest. According to him, it had been sitting unused for over a year and they just wanted the space back. Everything about the conversation felt believable. The only annoying part was that Marcus apparently worked really late hours. Every time we tried arranging a pickup, he'd say he wasn't home until after 10 p.m. Since his place was already around 45 minutes away from where I lived, I kept postponing it. Then one Thursday night around 8:45 p.m., he texted me saying he unexpectedly got off work early and asked if I could come that night. My girlfriend's birthday was only 2 days away at that point, and I was running out of time to find something. So even though I really didn't feel like driving out that late, I agreed. I borrowed my cousin's pickup truck and headed out. At first, the drive was completely normal. Traffic lights, gas stations, neighborhoods. But after about 30 minutes, the GPS started taking me farther and farther away from town. Houses became more spread apart. Streetlights disappeared almost entirely. The roads narrowed into dark, winding back roads surrounded by thick woods. I remember turning my music down because the silence outside started feeling strange. There weren't any other cars, no people, nothing. At one point, I actually checked the GPS twice because I thought maybe I'd typed the address in wrong. Eventually, the GPS directed me onto this narrow gravel road hidden between tall trees. The branches overhead practically formed a tunnel over the road. My headlights barely illuminated anything beyond a few feet ahead of me. The farther I drove down that road, the worse the feeling in my stomach got. Then finally I saw the house. And honestly, house doesn't even feel like the right word for it. It was a mansion. A huge old brick mansion sitting completely isolated in the middle of the woods. It looked ancient. Tall pillars lined the front entrance. Dark ivy crawled up the walls. Massive windows reflected almost no light. Most of the house was completely dark except for one dim yellow porch light glowing near the front door. It genuinely looked like the kind of place where horror movies begin. I remember slowing the truck almost to a stop just staring at it. Nothing about the place matched the Craigslist listing. I expected some middle-class suburban home, not this creepy estate hidden in the woods. For a second, I actually considered turning around and leaving. But I'd already driven almost an hour, borrowed my cousin's truck, and mentally committed to buying the thing, so I parked near the front steps and got out. The air outside was dead quiet, no insects, no wind. Nothing. Even my footsteps sounded too loud as I walked up to the door. I knocked once. The sound echoed through the entire house like I'd hit a drum. A few seconds later, the door slowly creaked open. Marcus stood there smiling at me. He was taller than I expected. Very thin, pale skin, probably mid-30s. His clothes looked wrinkled like he'd slept in them. And even though he he smiled, something about his expression felt off. His eyes looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "You found the place okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said awkwardly. "GPS almost lost me back there, though." He laughed softly but didn't really react beyond that. "The treadmill's upstairs," he said. "I cleared the room out already." That sentence stuck with me later. Not, "It's upstairs." "I cleared the room out." He stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. The second I walked through the doorway, I got hit with this heavy smell of dust, old wood, and something faintly rotten underneath it all. The inside of the house looked even stranger than the outside. Old paintings covered the walls. Antique furniture sat in corners under dim lamps. The wallpaper looked decades old. Every floorboard creaked loudly beneath our feet. The place didn't feel abandoned exactly, but it also didn't feel lived in. It felt frozen in time. Marcus started leading me upstairs while casually talking about how difficult it had been convincing his wife to finally sell the treadmill. But honestly, I barely listened to anything he said. I couldn't shake the feeling that somebody else was inside the house, not because I heard anything, because it felt like someone was watching me. When we reached the second floor, there was this massive hallway stretching across the house with doors lining both sides. Some were shut, some slightly open. As we walked down the hallway toward the last room, I glanced into one of the open bedrooms without really thinking, and instantly regretted it. There was a man sitting on the edge of a bed inside the room, completely motionless. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't reading, wasn't watching TV. He was just sitting there staring directly at me. I nearly stopped walking. The guy looked much older than Marcus. Late 50s maybe. Thin gray hair, hollow eyes. His expression was completely blank. Not angry, not confused, just empty. I looked toward Marcus, expecting him to explain who the guy was. He didn't even acknowledge him. He just kept walking down the hallway like nothing was unusual. That somehow made it even worse. Eventually, we reached the last room at the end of the hall. Inside was the treadmill, and absolutely nothing else. No bed, no dresser, no decorations, just the treadmill sitting alone in the center of the room under a flickering ceiling light. A few years ago, I was trying to sell off a bunch of furniture before moving into a new apartment across the state. At the time, I was living alone in a second-floor apartment with my dog Daisy. She was old, lazy, and honestly slept through almost everything. The only time she'd ever bark was if somebody knocked at the door. To make some extra money, I listed a few things on Craigslist. A coffee table, a TV stand, some lamps, and an old gray couch that barely fit in my living room. Most of the interactions were completely normal. People would message me, ask if the item was still available, maybe negotiate the price a little, then either show up or ghost me. Nothing unusual. Then one evening, I got a message from a guy named Ryan asking about the couch. His messages were short but polite. He said he had a pickup truck and could come get it that same night if I was available. Honestly, I just wanted the couch gone, so I agreed. We planned for him to come around 7 p.m. Right before he arrived, I put Daisy in my bedroom so she wouldn't get in the way while we moved the couch out. She hated strangers and would usually just hide under the bed anyway. Around 7:15, Ryan texted saying he was outside. I went downstairs to let him into the building. The second I saw him, something felt weird. Not dangerous immediately, just strange. Over text, he'd sounded confident and outgoing, but in person, he barely spoke at all. He was thin, pale, and looked exhausted like he hadn't slept properly in days. His beard was messy, his clothes looked dirty, and he kept avoiding eye contact. I tried making small talk while leading him upstairs, but every response he gave was either one word or just a nod. When we got inside my apartment, he immediately looked around the place very slowly, not at the couch, at everything else. The hallway, the kitchen, the doors, the windows. I remember feeling this weird urge to mention that my boyfriend would be home soon, even though I didn't actually have one at the time. I showed him the couch and asked if he wanted to check it out. Ryan just stood there staring at it silently for several seconds. Then he nodded. That was it. No questions. No checking underneath the cushions. No asking about dimensions. Nothing. Just staring. The whole thing felt off enough that I was already mentally preparing to tell him the couch had been sold if he started acting any weirder. Then Daisy suddenly started scratching aggressively at my bedroom door. That instantly caught my attention because she never did that. Ever. It sounded frantic, like she was panicking. I apologized and walked down the hallway to check on her. The moment I opened the bedroom door, Daisy pushed against my legs and started whining softly while staring toward the hallway. "Relax," I told her quietly while petting her. But even after calming down, she kept staring toward the living room. That uneasy feeling in my stomach got worse. I shut the bedroom door again and walked back toward the living room. Ryan was gone. At first, I honestly thought maybe he'd left, but when I checked the front door, it was still locked. I froze. I stood there in complete silence, listening for movement somewhere inside the apartment. Nothing. I called out, "Ryan?" No answer. I checked the kitchen, bathroom, closet near the entrance. Nothing. It made absolutely no sense. My apartment wasn't big enough for someone to just disappear. I tried calling his phone, straight to voicemail. I texted him asking where he went. No response. Eventually, I convinced myself the guy must have quietly left while I was distracted with Daisy. It was weird, but honestly, the entire interaction had already been weird from the start. So I locked the deadbolt, turned on the TV, and stayed in the bedroom with Daisy for the rest of the night. Around 11 p.m., I took Daisy outside for one last walk before bed. It was freezing outside, middle of December. Before leaving the bedroom, I remember tossing my phone onto the bed while putting on my heavier winter pants and jacket. I didn't want the phone shoved awkwardly into my inner pockets. That detail became very important later. I took Daisy downstairs, walked her around the back of the building for maybe 5 minutes, then headed back upstairs. The moment I walked back into my apartment, something felt wrong. Not visibly wrong, just wrong. Like the air itself had changed. I went into the bedroom and immediately noticed my phone was gone from the bed. I stopped cold. I checked the blankets, the floor, my pockets. Nothing. Then the realization hit me so hard it literally made my chest hurt. Ryan never left. I suddenly heard a soft creak somewhere deeper inside the apartment. Daisy immediately started growling. Not barking, growling, low and aggressive. I slowly stepped toward the bedroom doorway and looked down the dark hallway. Ryan was standing there, perfectly still, just staring at me. I felt every bit of blood drain from my face. He looked exactly the same as before, except now there was something deeply wrong in his expression. His face was completely emotionless. No embarrassment, no panic, nothing. "Why are you still here?" I asked. My voice barely even sounded like mine. He didn't answer. He just stood there holding my phone loosely in one hand. That's when pure panic kicked in, because suddenly every terrible possibility hit me all at once. How long had he been hiding there? What was he planning to do? Had he been watching me the entire night? I grabbed Daisy's collar and backed farther into the bedroom. "Get out of my apartment," I yelled. Still no response. He took one slow step forward, and that's when Daisy exploded. She lunged forward, barking violently, which honestly might have saved my life. Ryan immediately flinched backward, clearly startled by the sudden aggression. That split second gave me enough courage to react. I slammed the bedroom door shut and shoved my dresser against it while fumbling to open my laptop on the desk. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I called 911 through my laptop while Ryan started slowly pushing against the bedroom door from the other side. Not pounding, not screaming, just pushing, slowly, almost patiently. The dispatcher stayed on the line while I cried and tried explaining what was happening. Then suddenly the pressure against the door stopped. Everything went quiet again. Too quiet. About 6 minutes later, police arrived and searched the apartment. Ryan was gone, but they found the bathroom window open. He'd apparently been hiding inside my apartment for almost 4 hours, waiting for me to go to sleep. The officers believed he probably took my phone specifically so I couldn't call for help. What terrified me most was what they found afterward. Inside my kitchen cabinet beneath the sink, officers found a backpack that didn't belong to me. Inside it was duct tape, gloves, zip ties, and a hunting knife. About 3 years ago, I was using Craigslist constantly because I was preparing for a pretty major move across the country. I'd accepted a new job in another state, and since I wasn't planning on hauling a bunch of bulky furniture with me, I started selling almost everything I owned. Shelves, kitchen appliances, lamps, a desk, an old TV stand, and this large full-length mirror that had been sitting in my bedroom for years. As a woman living alone, I always tried being careful with online meetups. I never invited strangers to my apartment, and I never agreed to go to somebody's house either. Every exchange happened somewhere public and preferably during the daytime. For weeks, everything went perfectly fine. Most people were normal. Then I got a message from someone named Evan. He was interested in the mirror. His messages were polite, well-written, and honestly way more normal than most Craigslist conversations. He said he lived about an hour away, but he'd be willing to meet halfway if I still had the mirror available. He even suggested a gas station off the highway between our towns. At first, nothing about it seemed suspicious. He wasn't weirdly pushy, didn't ask personal questions, didn't try aggressively negotiating the price. If anything, he seemed overly normal. We agreed to meet Wednesday evening after I got off work. The only thing bothering me was the timing. By the time I'd leave work, it would already be dark outside. I almost canceled twice during the day because something about the situation kept nagging at me. But I'd already been trying to sell the mirror for almost 3 weeks. And honestly, I just wanted the whole moving process over with. So after work, I loaded the mirror carefully into the backseat of my car and started driving. The farther I got from town, the more isolated everything became. Streetlights disappeared. Traffic became almost non-existent. Eventually, there were stretches of road where I wouldn't see another car for several minutes at a time. I remember turning my music down because the silence outside started making me uneasy. About halfway there, I got a text from Evan. "Still good for tonight?" I replied yes. A minute later he sent, "Perfect. Almost there too." Looking back now, that message chills me because I don't think he was ever driving there at all. When I finally pulled into the gas station parking lot, my stomach immediately tightened. The place looked practically abandoned. The main building lights were dim except for one flickering fluorescent light near the entrance. One of the gas pumps had caution tape wrapped around it. Trash blew across the empty parking lot in the wind, and there wasn't a single other customer there. No employees visible inside, no cars at the pumps, nothing. I remember locking my doors immediately after parking. For a second, I genuinely considered leaving. Everything about the place felt wrong. Too quiet, too isolated, too dark. I checked my phone and saw another text from Evan. "Pulling in now." A few seconds later, headlights appeared down the road. A dark red pickup truck slowly entered the parking lot and parked directly beside my car. The windows were heavily tinted, so dark I couldn't see anything inside. And then the truck just sat there, engine running, nobody getting out. I remember staring at the driver's side door waiting for it to open while my heartbeat started getting faster and faster. Finally, after almost 30 seconds, the door opened. The second the man stepped out, I felt every bit of blood drain from my face, because I recognized him immediately. 2 months earlier, I'd gone on a date with a guy named Kyle after matching with him on a dating app. At first, Kyle seemed completely normal, funny, confident, maybe a little intense, but nothing alarming over text. But the actual date became uncomfortable very quickly. He kept ordering drinks for me, even after I said I didn't want another one. Every time I tried changing the subject, he'd redirect the conversation back towards sex or relationships, and whenever I mentioned leaving soon, he'd subtly pressure me into staying longer. The entire night felt manipulative in this weird, quiet way that's hard to explain unless you've experienced it. Toward the end of dinner, he insisted on driving me home because I'd had too much to drink. The problem was I'd barely even touched the drinks he kept buying me. I told him no several times. He kept pushing. Eventually I lied and said my roommate was already on the way to pick me up. Instead, I secretly ordered an Uber from the bathroom. I still remember the expression on Kyle's face when he realized I was leaving without him. He smiled, but it didn't look normal. It looked angry underneath, like he was pretending to be calm. I blocked his number the second I got home and never spoke to him again. And now, 2 months later, he was walking toward me alone in an empty gas station parking lot, pretending to be someone else. The second he smiled at my window, I knew this wasn't coincidence. It was planned, carefully planned. I immediately grabbed my door lock just as he reached the car. He tapped lightly on the glass. "Hey," he said calmly, "remember me?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly. Kyle kept smiling while trying my door handle. "You blocked me," he said softly, almost sounding hurt. "That wasn't very nice." Something about how calm he sounded terrified me more than if he'd been screaming. It felt controlled, like he'd imagined this exact moment over and over. I jammed the key into the ignition and started the engine. The second my reverse lights came on, his expression completely changed. The smile vanished instantly. His face twisted into pure rage. And then he pulled something from inside his jacket. At first, I thought it was maybe a flashlight. Then he slammed it against my driver's side window. The glass exploded beside my face. I screamed and threw the car into reverse, nearly hitting one of the gas pumps as I backed away. Kyle started shouting something I couldn't understand while running toward the car. I slammed the gear into drive and sped out of the parking lot onto the highway. I never looked back. I just drove. My entire body was shaking so badly I could barely keep the car straight. I called 911 while driving and pulled over several miles away near a brightly lit truck stop to wait for officers. By the time police reached the gas station, Kyle was already gone. And that's when things became even more disturbing. The name Evan was fake. The phone number came from a prepaid burner phone purchased with cash. And the dating profile Kyle originally used months earlier had already been deleted. It was like he intentionally erased every possible trace of himself. What terrified me most was realizing this probably wasn't random at all. He somehow found my Craigslist listing, knew I was moving, knew what I was selling, knew how to get me a loan. Which means there's a very real chance he'd been watching me long before that night. For weeks afterward, I could barely sleep. Every unknown number that texted me made my stomach drop. Every car parked outside my apartment too long terrified me. And honestly, I still think about what would have happened if my doors hadn't already been locked the moment he walked up to my car. Honestly, websites like Craigslist can seem harmless. Millions of people use them every day to buy furniture, sell old electronics, or meet up for quick deals. Most transactions are completely normal, but the terrifying part is that you never really know who's on the other side of the screen. Someone can pretend to be friendly, normal, trustworthy, and all it takes is one bad meetup at the wrong place or the wrong time. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. And before you leave, let me know in the comments, have you ever had a creepy experience buying or selling something online? Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.